Hmm, this is quite the read. Oh, hello there. Hello everybody. Well, I promised that at the end of my Black Widow Loki review that I would do a review of the Suicide Squad, and well, here it is. So, my review on the Suicide Squad. Oh, and in case you're wondering what this was actually, the source material that actually helped to inspire the tone of the Suicide Squad. It's actually a pretty good reading. I definitely do recommend it. Seeing as how the author, John Ostrander, actually has a cameo appearance in the movie. That's cool. But, of course, I should probably give a little bit of background as to how did exactly this movie come to be. Well, it's a very interesting story. So, turn back the clock 5 years ago, the theatrical cut of Suicide Squad was released in theaters. We have no idea how absolutely terrible that production was, and we had no idea about how badly the studio basically mistreated David Ayer and his vision for the movie. At the time, it was just this big movie that DC was doing. It was the next one they were releasing after BVS, and it was terrible. But it somehow not only managed to make nearly over $750 million, it also won an Academy Award for Best Makeup, the only DCEU movie to ever win an Oscar, and it was the worst one, arguably. But yeah, so of course, they wanted to pursue a sequel to Suicide Squad. Originally, David Ayer was going to be involved, however, he dropped out of the project to instead work on a Gotham City Sirens movie. Kind of made the right call there. So around 2017, 2018, Warner Brothers brought in Gavin O'Connor to direct the movie. And apparently the premise would have actually revolved around Deadshot facing off against Deathstroke. That probably would have been one of the plot elements. I also believe in a previous draft that one of them involved, I'm pretty sure it involved the Suicide Squad facing off against Black Adam, and Dwayne Johnson would have shown up. But of course that version got scrapped. And then Gavin O'Connor just flat out left around like 2018 due to creative differences. This is where we enter in James Gunn. Now, keep in mind, this was back around 2018, so at that point in time, James Gunn had just been fired by the Walt Disney Company from Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. So Warner Brothers was like, well, he's hot talent. I mean, the Guardians of the Galaxy movies are beloved movies. So let's get the guy that did those movies to do a movie for us. And so they presented him with all these different DC properties that he could potentially do, including Superman. But he personally chose to do an adaptation of the Suicide Squad because, he had an affinity for the source material, which makes sense. And hey, Suicide Squad 2016 was kind of DC's attempt to do Guardians of the Galaxy, so why not get the guy that actually did the Guardians of the Galaxy movies to do a Suicide Squad movie? Just makes sense. And then it was officially confirmed early January 2019 that the film was entitled The Suicide Squad, which James Gunn initially said was a joke, but the studio really liked it, so they kept the title. I'll probably make a video for another day about sequels and or films that either add or remove the word "the" to the title to make it different. I have a whole thing about that, but that's probably going to be a video for another day. But yeah, so Suicide Squad's officially announced. James Gunn will be serving as both writer and director of the movie, and it has an official release date of August 6, 2021. However, literally 2 months after that ended up happening, it was officially reported, hey, so James Gunn's actually is going to be doing Guardians of the Galaxy 3 for Marvel, which is awesome, but he has to do the Suicide Squad for DC first, which is understandable. And now here we are, over 2 years after that initial release date announcement. The Suicide Squad has officially been released in both theaters and on HBO Max for about a month. So yeah, that's how we got the movie that we did. But what was the actual plot of the movie? Well, it's the Suicide Squad. There are a bunch of criminals that are currently serving time in Bel Rep Penitentiary. However, if they go out on these missions, they could be able to get lighter, and succeed, they'll be able to get lighter prison sentences. And it's all headed up by Amanda Waller, who ends up tasking Bloodsport, who is a new character played by Idris Elba, to lead a team of other superhumans composing of himself, the character Peacemaker, who's played by John Cena, Ratcatcher 2, who was played by Daniela Melchior, King Shark, who, well, physically he was played on set by Steve Agee, he was actually voiced by Sylvester Stallone, and finally we have the Polka Dot Man, who was played by David Dastmalchian, as they have to infiltrate the Corto Maltese, which is an actual real-life location in the DC universe. In fact, they even mentioned it as early as Batman 1989, which is kind of crazy. And so anyways, they have to infiltrate the base alongside Harley Quinn and Rick Flag and other members of the Suicide Squad, like Captain Boomerang, TDK, Javelin, and others, in order to be able to destroy Project Starfish and stop the big bad guys from doing really bad things with it. Which, as we all know, turns out to be none other than Starro the Conqueror. Makes sense. But yeah, so all in all, was the movie good? Yes, it is. It is, without a doubt, probably the best comic book movie that has released so far this year. I really do think the fact that James Gunn has probably made the best movie out of his entire career here. Like, I think it is a really well done movie, because, for one, you really get the sense the fact that the people involved absolutely love what they're doing. Now, obviously, of course, the actors, who all do a fantastic job. I do love how the fact that they do bring over some people from the original Suicide Squad, like Margot Robbie, of course, is Harley Quinn, Rick Flag, played by Joel Kinnaman, Viola Davis's Amanda Waller, and, of course, Jai Courtney as Captain Boomerang. But other than those four, it's a completely new cast. And for the little bits and pieces that we get with them, they all do great. Sure, obviously, of course, some characters get more screen time than others, but when you're dealing with a big ensemble, it's very much one of the bigger problems that you have with stuff like Avengers Endgame or Infinity War, is that when you deal with these big ensemble pieces, you always have to worry about how much screen time each character gets and whether or not they get a moment to properly shine. But what separates Infinity War and Endgame from Suicide Squad is that you have to go into this movie knowing the fact that because it's the Suicide Squad, lots of people are going to die. Some people that you will love, some people that you really couldn't care less about. It doesn't matter. They have an all equal chance of dying, including Harley Quinn. That's probably important to know because a lot of people are like, oh, they're not going to kill off Harley Quinn. But she does have the potential to die in this movie. So it doesn't matter how big the character is. Any of them can die. And that's what I really respect about this movie, that, as good as David Ayer's original version of Suicide Squad that he probably would have been, the thing is, they're called the Suicide Squad because any of them can die during the mission. And that's what makes them so interesting, is that, you don't know who could live or who could die. That's what makes it so cool. And I really think James Gunn definitely nailed that tone and definitely nailed that mindset when it came to that particular aspect of the Suicide Squad. And I also really loved about how each character had a specific purpose to tell in the story. Like, for example, the character of Bloodsport, a lot of people initially thought this is just a stand-in for Will Smith as Deadshot because he couldn't come in due to scheduling conflicts. But what they were able to do with Bloodsport was actually really, really cool. And it's like, oh, he's not just a Deadshot stand-in. He's his own character that obviously has his own character traits. Like, obviously, of course, he doesn't have the best relationship with his daughter, but he is trying. And obviously, of course, even though he feels like the fact that there's no good in him, it does feel like the fact that whenever he needs to step up, he will properly step up. Then, of course, there's characters like Peacemaker, in which he believes in peace at any cost, even if it means killing men, women, and children, no matter what, in order to be able to ensure that peace. Polka Dot Man is just a mess of a man who was traumatized by his mom after, giving him these abilities. Ratcatcher 2, who is obviously at the heart of this movie, her ability is that, she can control rats, but that's honestly, really cool when you realize, there's a lot of places in the world that have a lot of rats. But obviously, and of course, Rick Flag, he's, of course, the military leader. He's the military liaison of the group. but he definitely is played with a greater sense of humor and sort of naivety than he did in the original Suicide Squad movie. And then, of course, Harley, she's Harley Quinn. I mean, I really feel like that I don't need to mention much. But easily, the standout MVP is King Shark. Because no matter what you think, he is amazing. Because even though he's dumber than a sack of bricks, he's still amazing. Not only that, but he can also rip you in half as well. And he's voiced by Rocky Balboa. What's not to love? But yeah, obviously, of course, the characters that we do see, they all get equal chances to... The interactions that each of the casting characters have with each other is really fantastic, and the dialogue that they have is really funny. Like, this is a really funny movie. Like, obviously, of course, not every joke hits, but when they hit, it really hits. And sometimes, while that it's a good laughter, there's another kind of laughter. It's like, I can't believe I just laughed at that. Like there, like a good example that Chris Stuckman noted in his review was that there was a sequence in which Peacemaker and Bloodsport, they're basically having a contest about who could have the coolest, about who could kill the coolest when they're infiltrating this base, and then they kill a ton of these individuals, and then they meet up with Rick Flag, and it's revealed, oh, these were actually the Resistance trying to stop the bad guys, and we just killed a good majority of them. And yeah, you kind of realize, oh, that's kind of bad. But that just kind of gives you a general idea about, the kind of stuff that happens in this movie. Like, there is an entire sequence with Harley Quinn in which she just goes around just murdering everybody. And it's a fantastic sequence. Easily probably the best live-action Harley Quinn sequence that we've seen. I honestly think it's probably, like, even though, Birds of Prey was more of a Harley solo movie than a Birds of Prey film, I think the fact that the version of Harley that we get here is probably, like, the best live-action version of Harley that we've gotten so far. And, of course, Margot Robbie does a fantastic job as Harley Quinn. But, yeah. And I also just really love the fact that out of all the people that they could have gotten for the villain, James Gunn chose Starro as the main antagonist. When I first saw that trailer back in March, and they first show off the Suicide Squad, and then at the end it shows, oh yeah, Starro's gonna be the bad guy, I was like, what? But that's just really cool, and it's just really out there for the Suicide Squad to have Starro. And of course, the action sequences, they are fantastic. They're just as action-packed, they're just as brutal and bloodied as you'd expect them to be. Honestly, it's amazing about how they didn't just go every single moment, just nothing but blood and guts and whatever. But that just makes the moments that do have stuff like that happens, like, for example, the moment, it's in the trailer, in which King Shark rips the guy in half. And it makes moments like that stand out all the more. And what's really cool is that apparently a lot of the effects, like a lot of the explosions, and even that shot of King Shark splitting the man in half, that was actually done via practical effects, which is really fantastic. And I really got to give it to James Gunn, because, like, this movie had a budget around $185 million. It could have been so easy for them just to CGI basically everything, but they actually went out of their way to actually make practical effects for literally everything. Like, the costume designs, the costumes are absolutely fantastic. Like, from Bloodsport's outfit to Peacemaker to King Shark to Harley's design and other things like that. Like, all the costumes that we see are absolutely fantastic. Same thing goes with the soundtrack. I mean, it's a James Gunn film, so it features really fantastic music. It opens with Folsom Prison Blues by Johnny Cash, which I definitely was not expecting them to open this movie, this DC film, with a Johnny Cash song. But it fits surprisingly well. And then, of course, there's a lot of other really cool musical bits and pieces that they do play that are really cool. But also the score that was just composed by John Murphy, the orchestral score, was really fantastic. Ignore that. Don't worry about that. That is only for me to worry about, and it's really minor, so it doesn't matter. Anyways, so yeah, the music by John Murphy is also really fantastic. And not only that, but whenever they get into, like, a really emotional moment, because there are a lot of really emotional, surprisingly emotional moments, and there are a lot of really heartfelt moments in this movie as well, in more ways than one. But when you see the movie, you'll know what I mean by that. But it really is, like, when the music really sets into some of those more touching and more heartfelt moments, it kind of really gets you. The only really downsides that I have with this movie are the fact, like I said before, because it's a big ensemble piece, there are going to be some characters that you wish could have gotten more attention than others. But say because of the fact that, the runtime, because, we're dealing with literally so many people in this movie, we have to focus on a certain amount of them. So there's that. Plus, there are going to be some deaths in this movie that are probably going to upset some people, which is understandable because, obviously, there are going to be some people you do get attached to, and that makes it all the more upsetting when you actually have to, witness them die. Sometimes in a really funny manner, and sometimes in a really heroic manner. It's really interesting about how it can go from one moment you're just laughing your butt off to the next minute just crying over almost on the verge of tears over the fact that your favorite character just died on screen right in front of you. But yeah, so overall, that was my thoughts on the Suicide Squad. Really fantastic movie. James Gunn, probably, like I said earlier, this is probably the best movie of his career. It's very obvious to me the fact that he was able to take everything that he learned from stuff like the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, but also a lot of the more low-budgety movies that he made, like the horror film Slither, or the movie Super that he did with Rainn Wilson, which was kind of a superhero horror comedy, and the fact that Rainn Wilson just played this guy called, like, the Red Bolt, or whatever his name was, and he just went around just beating up people with a red bolt. Obviously, there's a lot more to the plot than just he just runs around and just beats people up with a bolt. But it's very much like Suicide Squad. It's very darkly comedic, and that's like, if you really dig the Suicide Squad, I think you would definitely dig Super. And it's also really interesting to see sort of the early works of James Gunn and see how far he's really evolved in his filmmaking techniques, and also how big his movies have gotten too. But yeah, definitely James Gunn definitely did a great job with this. The direction and visual style was absolutely fantastic. The writing was very, very funny and really amazing. Each of the characters and actors involved all do a fantastic job with the roles that they're given. Even if it's for like 5 minutes of screen time, they do a fantastic job with those 5 minutes that they're given. The action sequences, of course, are fantastic. They're just as brutal and gory as you'd probably expect them to be in a movie like this. And surprisingly enough, even though this movie is 2 hours and 12 minutes, like, the pacing was just so good that I didn't even feel like it was dragging on at all. Like, it just, because I was just really interested in seeing, like, where exactly, like, this piece would be leading next. Or, oh, like, this is the really interesting sequence that's being done with this character and other things like that. So overall, I'm going to give the Suicide Squad a 9 out of 10. I think it is an absolutely fantastic movie. I really do think the fact that you should see it. However, do not show it to your young children, because this is not a movie that they could probably stomach. There is a lot of death, and there is a lot of blood and cursing and a lot of other things that younger children should not need to see or hear. But you heard it from me, so what can you do? So yeah, definitely I do recommend checking out the Suicide Squad. And also I recommend checking out the John Ostrander run of the Suicide Squad that, influenced the movie, alongside other stuff like Dirty Dozen, The Great Escape, and other things like that. Like, I do think the fact that this is definitely a really fantastic comic, like, even if you don't read the entire run, I still recommend checking out, like, the first volume, Trial by Fire. In fact, they actually did a recent reprint of it with the Suicide Squad as well, so yeah, definitely recommend the movie, and I definitely recommend checking out the comics that inspired them, very much like Invincible. So, yeah, so this was my review of the Suicide Squad. I should also mention that this is officially my last review that I put out before I officially have to go back to school. Yeah, of course, it's August, so I'm starting up class soon, but hey, I mean, there's really not much I can really do about that. But yeah, I hope you guys have been enjoying the videos that I've been putting out over the summer. I'll try my best to get out as many videos as I can, but I'll probably still be busy with schoolwork. I'll try to figure out a way how to work into a schedule like system. Like I'll record on like this day, depending on the assignment that I have or like how much homework I got. But yeah, I hope you guys do enjoy the video. Make sure to like and subscribe, and make sure to ring the little notification bell so that you don't miss out on any future uploads. Yeah, so I hope you guys enjoyed, and as always, stay gold.